moment came. I'm sure you've all been following the very dramatic events throughout the entire region, from Morocco to Iran. Actually, the most dramatic event is one that took place yesterday. It's the famous dog that didn't bark. There was supposed to be a demonstration, a day of rage in Saudi Arabia. It was crushed completely by the security forces. A few people dared to march, nothing else. I'm sure there are many sighs of relief in Western capitals and in autocratic regimes in the region, and in Israel. Saudi Arabia, of course, is the jewel in the crown. That's where most of the oil is, and one of the most harsh and brutal states in the region. Also the center of radical Islamism, made fun of jihadism, and a long-time close ally of the United States and before it, Britain. Yes, and the demonstration did not happen there, which is quite important. They did happen in other places, and the first one was actually in Western Sahara, which is occupied by Moroccan forces in violation of Security Council resolutions. It was a non-violent demonstration, brutally crushed. That this is a UN protectorate. It's supposed to be decolonized, so an inquiry, there was an appeal with the Security Council for at least an inquiry, but that was blocked by France, which is the protector of the dictatorships in its former colonial domains. However, it did spread to Tunisia, then later Egypt, the most important country, and beyond. These things like these don't come out of nowhere. There's a background, and it's worth thinking about a little, because it will also tell us something about the future, and even more important, it tells us something about ourselves, just as the non-event in Saudi Arabia did. In Egypt, as I'm sure you know, the amazing, quite spectacular uprisings were initiated by a small group of young people, tech-savvy, using contemporary technology, and they succeeded in organizing mobilizing forces way beyond anything they anticipated, partly because the ground was ready for it. They had a name. They called themselves the April 6th movement. The reason for the name is that on April 6th, 2008, there was a plan for one of the many actions of the very militant Egyptian labor movement. They were going to have large-scale strikes in one of the major industrial complexes, the Mahala textile plants, and there were to be solidarity demonstrations and so on. That was crushed by the Egyptian security forces, so it's kind of like the dog that didn't bark. That was insignificant and didn't make it to the Western attention because it was properly crushed by our favorite dictator. However, it was noticed in Egypt. Victims have a way of perceiving the world differently from those who hold the clubs. And the April 6th movement was named after this non-event. Incidentally, shortly after the crushing of the April 6th strike and solidarity action, President Obama went to Egypt for his famous Cairo speech, outreach to the Muslim world. He was asked on the way whether he would say anything about Mubarak's authoritarian regime, and he said he wouldn't. He said that Mubarak is a good man, doing good things, keeping stability, and there's nothing to criticize. The principle is, as long as things are quiet, populations are passive, obedient, distracted by something else, everything's fine. That holds for domestic society as well, I should say, but certainly in regions like that. Tony Blair tends to be a little slow in the take. He basically repeated that right in the middle of the uprisings. So he said that Mubarak, he said, is immensely courageous and a force for good. This is shortly before even the army told him to get lost. But there is a background that is worth remembering. If you take a look at what's happened so far, the reasons why the Western countries are minimally supportive, I mean rhetorically supportive, but in a muted fashion, is that so far there has really been no regime change. There's been a change of names, which is important. They've gotten rid of some of the most repressive apparatus. The press is quite free. There are labor actions continuing. All of that's important. There are moves towards a limited amount of democracy, at least. The military is still in control in Egypt and in Tunisia. They're not going to give it up easily. So a lot depends on the scale and the intensity of protests and actions, and also the support given to the youth. That makes a lot of difference. But at the very least, there'll be a significant legacy and implications for other societies, and a kind of a basis from which to go forward the next time something breaks out. The significance of what's happened was described pretty accurately in the business press, which often tends to be more accurate. They have an audience of readers who have to have a realistic conception of the world since they own it. The Wall Street Journal wrote that their leading political correspondent, he wrote that the fall of Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak marks a historic shift in the Middle East, away from the power structure America has leaned on for the past 3 decades, actually much longer, and towards a new one still being shaped by forces that the United States and its allies haven't yet learned to control. That last phrase is crucial. The assumption is we have to control them, we have to learn how to control them, haven't yet done it, so there's a task for the future. That goes way back, that concept, back at the end of the Second World War, when the United States was essentially taking over from Britain as a global hegemon. Plans were laid for how to run the world, including the British Empire, which the U.S. was taking over, much to the discomfiture of Britain, but they couldn't do much about it then. The crucial element was Middle East oil resources. These are described then by the State Department as stupendous resource, the greatest imperial prize in world history. We've got to have it. And it was pointed out by one of Roosevelt's major advisors that control of the Middle East can yield substantial control of the world, which is, of course, the goal. And that remains the case, of course, in British planning and actions. It goes back much earlier to the beginnings of the oil age, at least, in fact, beyond that. So these are old, deep-seated policies. They're not going to be abandoned easily. And there are good reasons for them. I mean, that is the major energy resource of the world for some time to come. And it does yield control of the world if you control it. So we can understand the concern of the Wall Street Journal that we haven't yet learned to control the new forces, the new wave of forces that's developing. It's also worth remembering that what's